What's going on, guys? It's Kirk with LaneFlix Media, and we're back to do SeptemPeaks 2022. This year, we are just going to be doing Season 1. Last year, we did a lot of the whole series and film of Twin Peaks. This year, we're just going to be focusing Season 1. We're going to be doing episode for episode, and we hope you guys enjoy. So, thanks for coming back, and please stay tuned, because we're doing every episode of the first season. So today I'm going to be starting with the pilot. Tommy and I actually watched the international and the original pilots, so we got a little bit more perspective on just what other people would have seen when it was released, which was interesting for sure. I will say I wasn't a big fan of the international pilot because it didn't seem like something that was a total story, and it felt like it was missing a lot of details, which are part of the great part of Twin Peaks. So I don't know, it was a back and forth type thing. But I would definitely, if you're just trying to get into the series, I would start with the original pilot and then go from there. But yeah, so that's what we're going to be covering today. We always watch our episodes with the Log Lady intro, and there were just a few parts of what she said that I wanted to include. Welcome to Twin Peaks. There are some are stories of madness, violence, the mystery of death, the mystery of the woods surrounding Twin Peaks. It is a story of many, but begins with one. Laura is the one, which I believe is a title of a later episode in the series, so I thought that was kind of cool. It actually starts with Josie looking at a reflection of herself, and her face is just next to two sculptures of wooden sculptures of ducks, I should say. Which I don't know if it was intentional or if it was planned in any way, but if you remember later in the series, in Season 2, Josie is actually killed and transformed into a dresser. Which is like really weird to just say that, but that's pretty much, pound for pound what happens. At least her soul is transferred to a wooden dresser. So I don't know if that was maybe some foreshadowing, but possibly. So at their lake house, Pete tells Catherine that he's about to go fishing and makes his way when he notices a strange bit of debris on the shoreline. Upon closer investigation, he realizes it's a woman and calls Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department to get Lucy. He asks to speak to Sheriff Truman, and there's a bit of humor here where Lucy transfers the call to a phone in the lobby, and she takes a second to kind of explain to Truman which phone it is, and it's just kind of a quirky little funny moment, but it's also terrible because this other guy has just discovered a dead woman, so it's like, I don't know. You feel kind of guilty for laughing, but it also is kind of funny. Sheriff Truman immediately hears she's dead, wrapped in plastic from Pete. He heads to Pete's location and calls Doc Hayward to join him. Or has Lucy, I should say, call Doc Hayward to join him. He asks Andy to photograph, and Andy becomes completely overwhelmed with sorrow, which is just to kind of show, I think, the audience, A, how tender Andy is, but then B, how close Laura is and was with a lot of the people of Twin Peaks. When Doc uncovers the plastic, Sheriff states Laura Palmer. So that goes to show that, she was either a bad kid or everybody knew her, which is, they're both kind of true. We get an immediate cut to Sarah calling for Laura at their home, kind of trying to get her up for school, daily routine kind of thing. We get a close-up of the ceiling fan, which becomes a motif that Lynch uses both in the series and in the film. At the Briggs home, Major and Mrs. Briggs enjoy breakfast, and they get a call from Sarah Palmer about Laura's whereabouts. Sarah then calls the football coach asking about Bobby to learn he had been late for practice every day for that past week, which is, I don't want to say evidence, but it's definitely a hint toward where Laura might be as well. Leland Palmer is sitting in Ben Horn's den, hearing a pep talk for a presentation to their Norwegian investors. During the meeting, Leland gets a call from Sarah. Sheriff Truman heads up to the lodge with Leland. And here, before I even get into what is about to happen, I just want to commend Grace Zabriskie for her performance as Sarah Palmer. It is one of the saddest and most genuine displays of trauma and emptiness I think any actress has ever done, ever. But just to see her in that state and doing what she's doing is pretty intense to me. She's very, very good in the show. She's good in everything I've seen her in, but specifically in Twin Peaks, she's on another level in that environment for some reason, and it's pretty amazing. They're talking on the phone, and then Sheriff Truman walks up to Leland while he's on the phone and kind of tells him, doesn't really say explicitly, hey, your daughter's dead, but Leland ends up getting it just from context. And the only thing that's really said is by Leland, he says, my daughter's dead. Which is really gut-wrenching because no one ever says it until he says it. We get a close-up of the phone cord, and it's possibly an emphasis on the evil that resides in electricity in Twin Peaks. It's kind of a thing that comes up more and more throughout the series. At the Double R Diner, Bobby is having coffee with Shelley serving. Norma sarcastically greets him, and they abruptly leave. Shelley thinks Norma likes Bobby, which I'm like, right, like that's totally true. Like, I don't think that's true at all. I think Norma is way smarter than they think, but it's also kind of a portrait of youth versus age, especially in a small town, which is funny, and it's pretty accurate. Bobby sees Leo's truck and abruptly stops, trying to take Shelley home, backs up, drops Shelley off, and in the hallway at the high school, Donna sees Audrey smoking, laughs. James walks up and asks about Laura. Bobby and Mike talk. The principal tells Bobby to go in the office. After a policeman comes in and a girl runs screaming from another classroom, Donna looks at James and somehow knows about Laura. It's very, very interesting and strange, the intuition that Donna has about the situation, but she pretty much gets what's going on just from the context of the situation and what she keeps hearing. And I remember being like that in high school, so it's a really true-to-life type moment. When something would be wrong at school, some tragedy happened or something, which didn't happen a lot, of course, but when it did, it was fairly obvious because all the teachers would get all hush-hush or like try to act more happy than normal. It was just obvious. Like, kids aren't that stupid. I mean, kids are kind of dumb, but kids aren't that stupid. They figure stuff out. So the police are interrogating Bobby, and the sheriff tells Bobby face-to-face. He tells Bobby face-to-face that Laura is dead. He then places Bobby under arrest for her murder, and this is all the situation with Bobby is because he wasn't at football practice. The principal makes an announcement. His voice, Tommy and I made the observation that his voice sounded a little bit like Optimus Prime, which is really true if you just close your eyes and listen. But there is a real moment of silence, a moment where we see Laura's true breadth of impact. Her death warrants tears from dozens, hundreds across the high school. The sheriff is questioning Sarah with Doc Hayward. Sarah screams, scared of the stairs. The stairs frighten her in their home. If nothing else, we get that Sarah is deeply disturbed by Laura's death. Before we get into all the supernatural stuff about the return and all that. Josie confronts Catherine and says to shut down the plant. She then addresses the workers and tells of Laura's death and of worker Pulaski's daughter missing, a fellow worker at their factory. Ronette's missing. Pulaski's daughter, Ronette, her missing status. She tells the workers to go home and be with their families. We see Oh, we see Ronette on the bridge, obviously disturbed and in her PJs, but her I don't know, PJs, pajamas, whatever you want to call them, they're kind of tore up, so it looks like somebody's beat her up a little bit. We're not really sure what's going on. James gives Big Ed and... Oh, James goes by Big Ed and Nadine's and gives Big Ed a note for Donna. And here we actually finally get Cooper's true entrance. This was particularly cathartic because we just watched the SNL parody from the 90s of Twin Peaks, which was a lot of people's intro to Twin Peaks. But it was really funny, and it was really cleverly written, and it was obviously done by someone who's a fan of the show, but it was also a little bit disheartening because of how accurate it was and how much it poked fun at the logic and the story and the absurdity of Twin Peaks. But nevertheless, it was great to see Cooper back the way he should be, because he was playing a silly version of Cooper in the SNL skit, so it's just good to kind of wash that slate clean again. But then here we have Cooper meeting Harry Truman. Cooper hilariously interjects quirky questions about Cooper hilariously interjects quirky questions between professional ones. The two then take a look at Pulaski in the ICU. She says, "Don't go there." Enter Dr. Jacoby. The substantial message of Jacoby toying with his hula dancer tie, slipping his finger underneath the hula skirt when mentioning Laura, is that the assumption is that Jacoby and Laura had some type of sexual romantic relationship. We're not sure what. It's never explicitly explained in the show, but that's pretty much the idea. That's the vibe. We have a closer look at Laura's body, and Cooper uncovers a letter under the ring fingernail. The letters R. When mentioning it to Diane, his tape recorder, he says, "Take this to Albert, don't go to Sam," which is a funny nod to Kiefer Sutherland's character in the film Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me. His character is Sam, but he's kind of known as fumbling, like screw-up type coroner. He's not a or forensics guy. He's not a like great detective or super tight like Albert. Albert's got all his P's and Q's in line, you know. And we get the mention of Albert, who makes his appearance in the next few episodes. Donna sees Ed at his place. She asks about James, and he gives her the letter. The letter says Roadhouse at 9:30. Mike pulls up and tells Donna to come with him in his car. Ed sticks up for Donna, and then Mike pulls off pretty angrily. Then we have Cooper reading Laura's diary to Diane while Harry's kind of overseeing. So this is where Cooper tells Truman that he's actually found a letter like this under another girl's nail who was murdered, and that letter was T. He then decides that this could be, and most likely is, the same killer as the one he had previously investigated. So he decides to investigate this as well. And then back at the Great Northern, Audrey is trying to grapple with her feelings about Laura's death and ends up ruining a business meeting that her father is putting on for a lot of the Norwegian investors. But she ends up just kind of bringing the vibe down. It's pretty... I mean, Sherilyn Fenn does a great job, but it's also hilarious that her dad's trying to make money and she's just like, "But I'm sad." And it just ruins it for everybody. So by the end of the episode, we go back to Sarah Palmer, and she's disturbed by a vision of a hand lifting a rock and then kind of picking up a bracelet underneath it. Which is later to be revealed as the bracelet that is missing whenever Laura dies. So, this is a really strong start to a series, but it's also very embedded in the story of the rest of the series. There's a lot of jumping off points. There's a lot of information and story elements about characters that really set up a solid mystery fantasy show. So, Yeah, I mean, I think the breakout performance of this episode specifically is Grace Zabriskie as Sarah Palmer. But of course, you gotta love Kyle MacLachlan's entrance as Dale Cooper. You gotta love Michael Onkeen as Sheriff Truman. There's just a lot of strong performances going on in one episode of television. Jack Nance was fantastic as Pete, and I mean, it's hard to pick a favorite, you know. But Josie and Catherine going back and forth. I mean, the woman who plays Catherine was an award-winning actress before she was ever in Twin Peaks. So I mean, it's just a great combination of character actors and characters in the story to kind of blend together and make Twin Peaks what it is. But yeah, I mean, the cool thing about the pilot is that you could just watch it as a movie, but you also, to me, it's what got me interested in the meat and potatoes of Twin Peaks, and kind of trying to see it for what it is. As like, it kind of started as this weird parody of soap operas while also trying to be fantasy sci-fi type thing. But then it just ended up morphing into this whole commentary about television and entertainment in general that you kind of get, you know, when you get into The Return and Some of Fire Walk With Me. But yeah, just as the start, it's a really, really solid movie, and it's a really, really solid episode of TV to watch. But it's definitely a good jumping off point too for people that haven't gotten into the series yet. So when writing the pilot, Mark Frost wrote the more verbal characters that had a lot of dialogue, whereas David Lynch was solely responsible for Cooper's dialogue. Even going on to say that he says a lot of the things I say, which is like, that's kind of crazy. But it also makes sense. If you have watched any of David Lynch's interviews or any of his direction, it's very obvious that Cooper is kind of an extension of himself. So yeah, they ended up selling the series to ABC for almost $8 million, which is crazy. Like, back then, TV was very stable. It was very much run-of-the-mill type programming. So for them to kind of make that kind of a deal, it's pretty special. It's a pretty big deal for sure. And I remember reading this. Josie's character originally was Giovanna, who was going to be played by Isabella Rossellini. So that was kind of an interesting change to the idea of the story. Twin Peaks actually originally aired too. They did not have the Log Lady intros. Those were written for Bravo reruns by David Lynch and performed, of course, by Catherine Coulson. That's kind of interesting. I didn't know that. I thought I read somewhere that they had aired when the show aired, so that's kind of cool, though. He added the Log Lady stuff. The light flickering on and off as Cooper is trying to look at Laura's, do a in-depth autopsy of Laura. That was actually a broken bulb or a malfunctioning bulb. Lynch decided not to change it because he liked the atmosphere that the flickering light was giving the scene. So the trees surrounding Twin Peaks are actually ponderosa pines, but Truman tells him that they're Douglas firs, so throughout the series he's convinced that they're Douglas firs. So yeah, it's pretty crazy too. Here in the pilot we get the birth of Killer Bob. So it was a happy accident made by a set decorator named Frank Silva, who essentially was caught in the reflection of a certain shot in the pilot. Well, instead of getting upset and scrapping it and going back reshooting it, Lynch actually used that as a subliminal hint to who Bob was and what he looked like. So, pretty clever and crafty storytelling there, for sure. It's a pretty solid episode, and it really sets up what's coming in the rest of the series. So yeah, if you're curious about Twin Peaks at all, I would suggest watching the pilot, because it does a good job of kind of showing you a good balance of what the show is all about, at least up until the movie and the return. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's streaming on Paramount Plus and Netflix, but definitely at least Paramount Plus. The international version is only available in the DVD sets, so you can get those, or you can just watch the original pilot, which I think is better anyway. And yeah, so I really appreciate you guys listening. It means a lot. Sorry Tommy wasn't here for the first episode, but hopefully episode 2 of season 1 we will get him back. And until then, my friends, I'll see you. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye.